Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm really excited to be here tonight with two authors whose books I absolutely love. For the theme of tonight's event is coming of age, queer, and Catholic. And the books that we are celebrating are The Lesbiana'S Guide to Catholic School and Burning Butch. So first, I'm going to introduce the author of The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, and that is Sonora Reyes. Sonora uses they, them pronouns, and they are a queer second-generation immigrant who attended a Catholic high school. They write fiction full of queer and Latinx characters in a variety of genres. Sonora is also the creator and host of hashtag QPOC Chat, a monthly community-building Twitter chat for queer writers of color. They currently live in Arizona in a multi-generational family home with a small pack of dogs who run the place. You can visit them online at sonorareyes.com. I'll put that in the chat for folks because we always want you to go visit and learn more about all of our authors. And we're also joined by R.B. Mertz, who uses the thou pronouns. They are a trans, non-binary butch and poet and artist. They are still deciding on a first name. Mertz wrote the memoir Burning Butch, and it was published by Unnamed Press in 2022. The essay How Whiteness Kills God and Sprinkles Crack on the Body, published by Mistress Syndrome, and the poetry manuscript Cut, which was a finalist for the X.P. Kennedy Poetry Prize. Poems coming soon in Granica Magazine and Arc Poetry Magazine, as well as a short play in another Chicago magazine. Mertz's memoir, Burning Butch, has been called cool by Eileen Miles and used in the same sentence as the word classic by Don Lundy Martin. Mertz is on Instagram at RB Mertz, but not on Twitter due to potential altercations with the Secret Service not being on Mertz's to-do list. Mertz taught writing in Pittsburgh for 11 years and was honored to be a finalist for City of Asylum's 2021 Emerging Poet Laureate of Pittsburgh. On January 1st, 2021, Mertz left the U.S. for love, and they now reside in Toronto, Ontario, traditionally the territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. So welcome to you both. I'm so happy to have both of you here, and I'm happy to have everybody watching with us from wherever you're watching. You can feel free to shout out in the chat where you're watching from. And if you've already read one or both of these great books, feel free to say so. We always love to have a lively chat. You can also ask questions in the Ask a Question box or in the chat, and I'll be sure to bring those in. So as a queer and trans Catholic who has some religious trauma and some queer high school trauma, I felt so seen and loved by both of your books. And I felt actually that I was healed by both of your books. And I just want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for writing these books. I don't say that to everyone. I really don't. You know, I read a lot of books. I like a lot of books. I would not say that most books heal me, but I feel like I experienced something with both of your characters that really helped me. And I imagine that many Catholics and recovering Catholics, but people from other faith backgrounds as well who have experienced religious trauma may really feel the same. So I'm wondering if we could just begin, Sonora, if you could begin just by telling a little bit about the plot of the book and how you came to write it, and then we'll go to Mertz, and then we'll have each of you read.
Okay. So my book, The Lesbiana'S Guide to Catholic School, is about a 16-year-old teenager, obviously a 16-year-old teenager, named Yamilet, who voluntarily goes to Catholic school with her brother after he's been getting into too many fights at their old school and getting into too much trouble. What she doesn't tell him is that she has ulterior motives. She actually wants to go to Catholic school because she just got rejected and outed by her crush / ex-best friend, and she wants to get a fresh start of her own. So she vows never to fall in love again, and then immediately her attention gets caught by the only openly queer girl at school, at the new school. So shenanigans ensue. Um, that is the Lesbiana'S Guide to Catholic School. And you said, how did I go about writing it?
Well, just how did you come to this story, I guess, is maybe the question.
Okay. So I kind of, it was an accident. I originally was I always wanted to write like a big like fantasy novel or sci-fi or something like that. And I like wrote a lot of fan fiction, and I had never written an original novel before. And then it was like National Novel Writing Month. And on October 25th, I was like, I'm going to write a book. And I realized I didn't have time to plot out like a magic system or a whole new world or like all the science behind everything. So I was like, I got to write about something I intimately know and something I can talk a lot about. So I decided to write about a queer kid going to Catholic school and going back into the closet and see how that turned out. And then the Lesbiana'S Guide to Catholic School was born.
I love it. NaNoWriMo, for folks who don't know, National Novel Writing Month, can be very helpful for just like making you start somewhere. So
Yeah, for sure.
November. Mertz, do you want to share a bit about your memoir?
Sure. I wrote. I was a poet, and people didn't understand what I was talking about a lot of the time because I kind of came from this very conservative Catholic background. I was writing like poems based on cool biblical references that I realized in graduate school that most people my age did not know. And they were like, where do you come from? Like, why did you believe that stuff? That's over. That's been over for years, like people don't worry about religion anymore. And I was like, well, a lot of people do actually. And so I kind of wanted to tell what had happened to me or what I had been through, because a lot of people who see me in the world now just kind of assumed I didn't know what I was talking about. If I kind of brought up Catholicism or mentioned, saints or something, they'd be like, oh, you don't know about that. And so I was like, this is not a black and white thing. Like people come from all kinds of places and believe all kinds of things. And so, yeah, I wanted to kind of show where I came from because I didn't see it anywhere. And I didn't really think it would be believable as a novel. Like I thought, like if I said if I tried to write about these things, people would be like, that doesn't happen anymore, But because a lot, like the school I went to especially was very locked down into the erasure. So yeah, I wanted to make it visible.
I think it's so important that both of these are contemporary books, right? So one is a novel, one is a memoir. But as we are experiencing this moment of intense legislative hatred towards queer and trans young people, a lot of straight cis people are like, well, but I mean, who has a problem with gay people anymore? And it's like, have you visited any high school or many colleges in America? Because shit is still popping off everywhere. Like there's this idea that everything is healed and that everything is great. And that's absolutely not the case for the majority of American teens, right? So or college age young people. And I really appreciated the nuance with which you both brought the issues to bear. And I want to dig into that, but I do want you both to read first. So Sonora, will you read just a little bit so folks can get the voice of your book?
Sure. So I'll just read from the very beginning, just a couple paragraphs. Chapter 1, Thou shalt not trust a two-faced bitch. 7 years of bad luck can slurp my ass. It's been way too long since I punched something, and that vanity had it coming. Stupid mirror. Stupid Yami. Whatever. Mirrors are overrated, and punching them is underrated. I never liked looking at myself anyway. Not because I don't think I'm cute. I mean, I am cute, objectively, but that's besides the point. I like this new reflection better. It's cracked enough that I'm hardly recognizable, splintered in all the right places. I did that, with my fist. Who says I'm not tough? I don't run from a fight as long as it's with an inanimate object. I didn't punch the mirror hard enough to shatter it, but the pulsing in my knuckles tells me I hit pretty hard. My chest swells at the accomplishment, and so does my hand. Shit, that's a lot of blood.
Thank you. So that gives folks a sense of the voice. Even though both of these books obviously deal with a lot of serious themes, they're also both pretty funny. So I don't want folks to get the impression that these are both downers. Definitely not. So Mertz, I'd love for you to read for a minute as well, please.
I think this isn't a funny one necessarily, but there are funny things in here, like
No
ER
question.
says. This is my freshman year of college, my first dorm room. I thought about an interview I read with John Irving, how he said he'd never write a pro-life character because nobody who was pro-life was interesting. I knew I was interesting, and so was Amy, my roommate. I'd been so mad I'd left his books at home, even A Prayer for Owen Meany, which I'd loved so hard. I'd looked at the books on my shelf, knowing that great writers wrote their own experience and that their experience mostly involved rejecting the big conventions of society, especially religion. They were all by men, all the books I'd brought with me. I kept having the experiences I was supposed to have right like them, but nothing I'd experienced fit into their blueprints for stories. I thought about what was happening at Bennington right now. Somebody was taking the Sondheim class I wanted to take. I knew Jesus demanded sacrifices and that the biggest sacrifice you could make for him was yourself. Somewhere he'd said something about tearing your eye out if it caused you to sin. I wondered if I could tear my heart out.
Thank you. So I want to just talk a little bit about the commonalities in your books. One of the things that I really loved in each of your books was how important siblings are. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit because, Sonora, the sibling relationship is beautiful and so vital. And it's truly life-saving in your book. And Mertz, the sibling relationships in your life are also really vital and life-saving, but also sort of this thing that keeps you sort of tied into your family at a point where you might otherwise have broken free. It's a complicated relationship. And so I wonder if y'all could talk a little bit about how you think about the role that siblings play in both of your books.
Mm-hmm. I can go first.
Should we start? Yeah, you go first.
Okay, sure. So originally when I set out to write this book, Cesar, who is Yami's brother in the book, he was originally supposed to be her best friend, not her brother. And that was how it was in the outline. But then as soon as I started writing the book, I was like, no, like this is her brother. Like it has to be her brother. And so I had to like change everything about it. Because originally she was supposed to be an only child. And I'm so happy that I did that because I feel like the sibling relationship in the book it ended up being like the heart of the book. And the first, when I outlined it, it was nothing like what it is now. But yeah, I feel like even if it's not like a blood sibling, it could be like found family. It could be like a friend who you consider as close as a sibling. But I feel like those relationships really are life-saving and like, especially for someone going through like what Yami is going through, like being queer and closeted in a Catholic school and like having all these influences that are telling her she's like bad or going to hell or whatever. I think having that relationship could really like make such a difference. And I think that's true for so many people. Like, even if it's, like I said, doesn't have to be a blood sibling, but like found family is a thing that I super love in fiction and in real life. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm it's interesting too. Like, I think it has something to do with the things that we see in ourselves and that we kind of find shameful about ourselves. If we see it in the eyes of someone else who's like like you say, like it doesn't have to be a sibling, like, but there's a power in like the length of the relationship. So to me, when my siblings weren't horrified by me, but they had come from the same place as I was, and then one of my siblings, actually several of my siblings, came out in various ways over the years, and so like it really became like I don't know, like not just a validation, but like a kind of an affirmation in your goodness, I think, because like you're like someone who's like a sibling to you is like just sees you as, you know, I don't know, someone to play with and someone to like love and spend time with. Right. Like it's like a kind of simplified relationship in a way. And it's like, we're just here together. Like, we don't know how we got here but we're here. And then if that person can see you as good, right, when all these other things are telling you that you're bad, that's really powerful. And in fact, one of my sisters, like, because this is also a puzzle to me, like one of my sisters, the one after me, she has a different bio dad than me. So I think that is actually a big part of the explanation. But she read the catechism of the Catholic Church, and it was like, don't bring gifts to Protestant weddings, don't celebrate Protestant marriages or interdenomination marriages or Jewish marriages or Muslim marriages, don't bring presents. And she was like, and then it was like, and of course, no presents for like fornicators or homosexuals. And I don't know what part of the catechism this is, but it's very specific about the presents. And she was like, that's stupid. Like, it just took her like 1 minute, you know, like she was just like, oh yeah, that's dumb. I don't believe that. But for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm bad. Like, I'm in this bad category, you know, with Protestants. But she just saw, she was like, oh no, like she put it together really quickly. It was like, oh no, you know, that's silly. Not worried about that. And that was powerful for me to see, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that's so helpful, right? As you both said, like the things that other people can see in us who love us that we can't see in ourselves, and vice versa, because there's some mirroring that occurs in both of your books for the siblings as well, where you're able to mirror that back, or your main character is. And Sonora, I don't want to butcher the language of your book, so can you say the phrase that Caesar and Yami say to each other, which means sort of like, we're the same, or I see you, or sort of like in solidarity?
Yes. Inlak-ish.
And can you talk about kind of how that?
Yes. So there's a Mexican poem about this Mayan phrase, the code of the heart, Inlak-ish. The poem is, I'll say it in Spanish and then I'll say it in English. So in Spanish, it's, tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, te hago daño a mí mismo. Si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. It means, you are my other me. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. So Yami and Cesar, they have this pasted on their bathroom mirror because Cesar is like obsessed with this. Their dad is very like, you know, he was deported when they were young, but when he was still there, he was very vocal about like their indigenous heritage, and their mom isn't really like that. So Cesar has like clung on to that, whereas Yami feels more distant. But throughout the book, and this kind of goes along with what you asked about, like the importance of like sibling relationships and like finding that like love in each other. It is something so like, there's a line in the book, I'm paraphrasing, but Yami says like, in Lakesh, like, you're my other me, I love you, so I must love myself. And so she realized, like, she comes into that like self-love there through the love of like her sibling. So yeah, I think that is like a really important part of the book. Just like that sibling bond, and she feels that for other people too, but for the most part it's her and her brother.
I loved that, and I thought it was such a beautiful through line throughout the book, and it kept, you weave it through, and it morphs in its meaning and its resonance, and it sort of echoes throughout. And by the end, no spoilers, but it takes on many more meanings. So it's really great.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to switch to talking about mothers a little bit. So, Mertz, in your book, one of my favorite lines in the book is about mothers. You say, Jesus had to die for us on the cross, but our mothers' personalities died for us in living rooms, in laundry rooms, kitchens, delivery rooms, backyards, stairwells, driveways, long after we kids had fallen asleep. Eventually, Mom's eyes started to look different, more still than they used to be. Her face and everything about her got harder and harder to recognize. She and the other homeschooling mothers were carving molds out of their own bodies right in front of our eyes that they hoped we'd fit into too. It felt good to be who they wanted me to be instead of trying to be myself. Day after day, I slipped further into their sameness. And I think that's so beautiful. It looks like Mertz is
No.
well, I'll start. So, Sonora, in your book, the mother is a really beautiful, complex figure. Because at the beginning, she really favors Cesar and really, loves him in a way that is painful for Yami, because she feels like, why do I have to do everything? Why do I have to be so good? It's a dynamic that we often see in families where the mother is hard on the daughter and gentle on the son. And she also has some traditional religious values. And through the relationship is very nuanced. I mean, she's also very hardworking. She's trying to make a life for her kids. And so I wonder, did you have to go through a lot of drafts for getting the mom? I often wonder in YA if it's easier to write the young people, or, if you get to a certain age and then it starts to be easier to write the parents.
I actually didn't change much about the mom from the first draft. The only thing that really changed about the mom, which is something that changed about Yami, which kind of ripple effect changed about the mom, as I brought in the jewelry business to be a lot more prominent than it originally was. So originally Yami didn't do that as like a little side gig, and now she does. And so that brought in the mom a little bit more. So they have a little bit more time to bond through their shared jewelry making business. But other than that, the mom pretty much, her journey, her arc stayed the same from the beginning, actually. There was a lot of other things that changed, but that hers stayed the same.
And what about the father? Did you always know that he would be off screen, in the sense of he's been deported and he's present in the family in the sense of he's FaceTiming, I felt like that relationship was very realistic in terms of how people do keep in touch across, long distances and these terrible, unjust situations. Like that felt very real to me. Was that on the page from day one as well?
Yes, the parents both stayed pretty much the same. I changed a lot about Cesar and a lot about Yami. But as far as like the side characters and the background, like a lot of that stayed exactly the same from the beginning. I did like kind of, I don't want to spoil anything, so I shouldn't I shouldn't say too much, but I did deepen some of the stuff with the dad and like her feelings towards what happens when she tells him. So I am not going to spoil what happens, but I did explore those feelings a little bit more and explore her like journey of like with each person she comes out to, because you have to come out multiple times over the course of your life to everybody basically that's in your life, and like everyone's going to react differently and it's not always going to be how you expect. So I kind of did change. I didn't change how anyone reacted, but I deepened like her perspective of it and like how she reacts to them reacting, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that so we're trying to get Mertz back. I'm sure we will get them back soon. But I wanted to talk about homophobia and how homophobia works in both of your books. But I think one of the things that I really appreciated most about your book, and it's a similar thing in Mertz's book, is that so often there's this idea that only men are homophobic. And I think particularly for people who are lesbians or who are perceived to be lesbians, even if your sexuality and gender is more complicated, the homophobia from women is so much more painful because it's more intimate. And so the homophobia from Bianca, who is Yami's first love and first best friend, is so cutting and so relatable. And I think a lot of queer women experience that. Yay! Okay, you're back. Good. Maybe, okay. We're gonna hope they get back. But it's that level of homophobia, and then the homophobia of other straight girls in the school who tease them and make fun of her and make fun of Bo. And I thought that was super realistic. And I realized that part of what I really responded to is that I had not seen that many depictions of that, because so often it's just like the jock calling someone, the F word. But seeing it in all the intimate, cutting, mean ways that women and girls do it to each other, I thought was really important. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the depictions of homophobia.
Yeah, so I wanted to show like a very like nuanced range of the different ways that people can react. And so there are multiple different kinds of people that are homophobic towards Yami in different ways. But there's also going to be people who aren't. And I wanted to show like a wide range of that. But yeah, for Yami, a lot of it is going to be people that she didn't necessarily expect. Like, for example, there's a scene in the book where she's at a party and she's afraid to. One of the girls asks her to like dance with her to like make this guy jealous. And she's the whole time just burning up, like, oh my gosh, like they're going to know I'm gay. They're going to know I'm gay. And then the second she leaves, that girl makes out with another girl, but it's straight. It's just to make a guy jealous. And she's like, how is this happening? Like, they're homophobic, but they're doing this. Like, how is this a thing? And like, that's something that is so real. Like, I feel like a lot of like straight girls will like kind of act a certain way towards someone who's like outwardly queer, or even someone that they don't know is outwardly queer, because Yami wasn't at the time, but how they act towards queer people is like totally different than like, oh, but they're safe because they're not actually gay, they're just doing this for attention or whatever they're doing it for. And so it's very hard for Yami to like she feels like it's very unfair that like she can't have that. Like she can't have that protection of just being like, oh, well, it's fine, I'm straight, so I can kiss a girl. Which is like a wild thought to have. But yeah, so I don't know. I kind of got away from myself with that question, but yeah.
No, I think it's very relatable. And so, Mertz, in your book, I don't know how much you heard, but the question was about how
I heard it all, but I just was trying to join.
Okay, yeah. So in media, so often homophobia is portrayed as like coming from men and being violent. And in both of your books, there's a lot of homophobia coming from women. And in your book, some of it is internalized homophobia from girls and adult women who clearly had feelings for you and couldn't reconcile those feelings and were then cruel to you as you know, as a way of coping with that. And so I thought that was really relatable and really nuanced, and something that I, as a butch teenager, experienced a lot of, like, girls and women being nice to me, and then like being really like pushing me away in really hurtful ways. And that's actually in both of your books. This, like, we're going to be super close, and then all of a sudden treat you like you are a pariah. And again, that's not something I've seen a lot in other books, and I think it's a really important part of talking about homophobia, especially towards lesbians and queer girls. So, Mertz, can you talk a little bit about kind of your experience of writing about that? And I imagine it was painful to bring that stuff back up, but why did you want to include it in your book?
Well, yeah, I was always trying to, right? Like I would see a show where like the kind of homophobia you're talking about is depicted, and I would think like, well, I've had an analogous experience to that, like, but it doesn't look like that. Like, it's not like being shoved up against the locker and called the F word, you know? It's like this like very weird gaslighty thing of like, we're gonna make out, and then I'm gonna like tell you that was just total friendship. You think it was anything else. And it was like, well, that's weird, right? But like there was no one you could tell, because that was the only person you were out to. Also, like, the closet really makes all that stuff a lot more powerful, all that gaslighting that goes on. And yeah, I think when I was writing about it, it was really important to me, in all those situations, like pretty much, especially with the women who are older than me, though, because the younger women I'm in, relationship with still, and we've kind of evolved our thinking about what happened between us. But the older women, that was something that I really sort of wrote about as though I was like writing a kind of legal document or something. Like, I was like, this is what happened, and trying not to read anything into their behavior or words beyond what I remember this happened, and then I crafted that to make it something other people might want to read, right? But like, it was still really about, for me, like them saying like their version of things that, was kind of calling me like a pervert in various forms, like usually not as meanly as that even, but like some nicer version of calling me like
I think we're frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna hope that Mertz will pop back up. Sorry, we were having some internet difficulties tonight, y'all. I want to encourage folks, of course, to read both of your books. And folks can click this teal link at the bottom of the screen to buy both books from Charis. It really does help us when you buy the books. One of the things that I think is really nuanced in Mertz's book is the that gaslighting. That like, what are you talking about? I never had feelings for you. And that comes up in your book with Bianca, of even though it's not clear to me what Bianca's sexuality is ultimately. Like, I don't know if Bianca really did catch feelings for Yami or not. It felt nuanced and interesting in ways that I appreciated. That's actually not ever resolved, because I don't think it's ever resolved for Yami. But like that feeling of like, how could this not have been real? Like, you made me feel crazy and like a pervert and all that stuff. And then to have the weight of religion behind all of it, and weaponized, is so painful. And it's just not talked about a whole lot. And I think what Mertz just said about like the closet, then if that's the only person who knows you're gay, and then suddenly they are shunning you, or telling you that you've misunderstood something and you're terrible, that's just doubly painful. And so there's several sort of analogous incidences like that in your book too, not just with girls, also with boys, experiencing the sort of silencing of the closet. And I wonder, I think so many people think the closet doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you offer a lot of nuance around the closet and around, like, it's not always safe to come out, and that's okay. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the politics of that for you, or the thought behind the book for you, as you were writing those parts. Did you was that consistent for you, or did your thinking evolve as you were writing it?
I think it was pretty consistent. I definitely went in not having a clear idea of like the message I wanted to get across with the book. But as I was writing it, I was like, okay, I really want people to take out of this book that, like, it's okay to come out on your own terms. You don't have to, like, come out of the closet just because you feel like you're supposed to, like, because you're like living a lie, or you're, feeling pressure to come out. I feel like I really wanted to drive home that, hello, oh, goodbye. I really wanted to drive home that, there is no like right or wrong way to like be queer. You can be in closeted and you're just as valid. You can be out and proud, and it doesn't make you any better or worse. And as long as you're, in the closet, like, you're just doing what you have to do to survive, and you're not actually lying to anyone. Like, that's just your own, you don't owe anyone an explanation for who you are, and you can give that explanation willingly whenever you're ready to, but you don't have to. And I think that's just so important, because it's like, I feel like a lot of young people especially feel like they have to come out, just because that's the way to like live more authentically. And if it's not safe for you, if you're not ready, then you don't need to. And you don't have to have a reason to not be ready either, as long as you just don't feel ready. And whenever you do feel ready, then you can make that choice for yourself. And I think it's really nice. It was really nice to be able to write Yami, having a chance to. So she did get outed at her old school, so that choice was taken away from her. But at the new school, she goes back into the closet, which most people would see as like a bad thing. For Yami, it's kind of freeing, because now when she comes out, it's going to be on her own terms, and it's going to be when she wants to. So, yeah, I thought that was nice to
I think that's really important. Yeah. And I think so many people, have gotten the message that they have to come out, and for queer people and trans people, right? This idea that like Trans Day of Visibility means that you should out yourself on social media. And, there are lots of people for whom that is really not safe. It's not safe at school. It's not safe for their place of employment, their religious community, all those things. And, I do always encourage folks to really, think about all of the places that their social media posts will be seen, because not everybody deserves your truth. It's not about shame. It's about people who have earned the right to know you in all of your complexity, because we don't demand that of straight people, and we don't demand that of cis people. Right. So, so Mertz, I wanted you to be able to finish your thought. I'm sorry that we're having internet issues. You were saying that, you were very careful in crafting the parts about the adults. And it seemed like you were about to talk a little bit more about those situations between where there was an age imbalance and a power imbalance. Do you want to speak a little more to that?
Yeah, I also kind of want to connect it maybe to what, like, I mean, I want to put pressure on people for whom it is safe to come out, I guess. Like, I think it is not, certainly not fair to demand, especially young people, to come out. But and people who are vulnerable in all kinds of ways, but also like, I think unfortunately that's part of how we survive, is by seeing people who are out. And when like those older folks who were in relation to me, I think were folks who definitely couldn't come out as whatever they were, anything that they were. Actually, a lot of things, feminist was a thing that people had to come out as, in that world I lived in. So certainly they if any of them was bisexual, they could not be like, I'm bisexual. That would have threatened a lot of things in their world. But also I would say that they were probably people who could have survived that. Like, they weren't teenagers who were going to be homeless. They were adults whose maybe worlds depended on homophobia. So maybe that world should be a place that they leave, you know? I mean, also, like, I don't want to, I know I'm specifically talking about these people, right? And I wouldn't even advise or sort of, I don't want to speak for them, but I do want to at the graduation ceremony most recently at the college I went to, a woman wore a rainbow flag attached to her wrist, and they cut it out of the video of the graduation, like before they uploaded it to the internet. Like, it was so dangerous for her to do that in terms of her society where she lives and her life, and the reaction she got were like, I mean, not, like, socially dangerous, right? Also, like, not physically dangerous. But yeah, absolutely is queer erasure. And like, it made me so mad, because it was like my friends and I did shit like that 10 years ago, 20 years ago now, were like little rainbows, and people got pissed off, and people, you know, just acted like we didn't exist. And so, yeah, I definitely like, I hate the idea of anyone feeling like they should come out if it's unsafe for them. But then I also do want to kind of ask people for whom it is safe, for, like, because I know a lot of, like, for example, just people who aren't like kind of visibly queer, who kind of like try to make themselves more visible when it is safe. And that stuff I think is really powerful. And kind of, yeah, like, we just had to present it with nuance, like, come out. Like, it is good to come out, you know, like, it's really powerful and freeing, even if like I lost all my friends when I came out. Not all, like, I can count the ones I didn't lose, you know what I mean? Like, and it was a big deal it was hard to keep in our lives. But I would like not trade for a second with the people who didn't come out. Like, their lives are a lot harder than mine, I think. And it was totally worth it.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, both of your books are offering visibility right now. You know, I mean, the fact that you have both written these books that are going to make people feel seen. I mean, even me, I am a 40-year-old adult who has a lot of support and has read a lot of queer books, but, you know, I got something from reading each of your books that I had not gotten from other books. So I really believe so much in the power of visibility through literature, right? That like, that, and especially books that feature young characters, whether that's YA or memoir or even poetry, right? Like, it's so important for young people in particular to see their lives reflected with nuance and complexity. And I think that's the beautiful thing about both of these books, is that there's not even the bad characters in both of your books, they aren't one-dimensional, you know. Even, you know, the shitty bullies try to apologize, you know, in Sonora's book. You know, the people who are most closeted and self-hating in your book, where it's like they're complicated. Like, you actually, I see them as whole human beings, even while I get how much damage they've done, right? So I think that's a testament to both of your gifts, that you managed to evoke such complexity on the part of everyone, not just the heroes of the story, right? And I love that about both of these books. I wonder if we could pivot to talking about faith a little bit. So You know, it's really hard to write about religion, full stop. It's really hard to write about a religion that you have been a part of. It's particularly hard to write about religion in America in the year of our Lord 2022, when everything is weaponized. And it's really hard to write about queerness and religion, right? Because as you were saying, Mertz, like people who look like you aren't supposed to care about religion, aren't supposed to know anything about God, right? There's this idea that only certain people are allowed to talk about God. And often that doesn't include women. That certainly doesn't include trans people. Often it doesn't include people of color, right? So this whole idea of who gets to speak with authority about God, in this country, but throughout a lot of the world, is so small relative to the scope of humanity. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how you felt about writing about spirituality, God, religion, and what you hope people would feel. I have a writing teacher, who said, the beginning of the book teaches you how to read the book. The end of the book teaches you how to read the world. And so as your readers are closing the book, how do you hope that they think about God and spirituality?
As totally separate from human institutions. Maybe that's a little extreme, but I think that was kind of the freeing moment for me, was when I separated spirituality and God from the Catholic Church. Like, this is not the only, and I just started thinking of it like a language. That's the language that I spoke. That doesn't mean it's the only language, and so at the same time as I have a lot of tension around this, actually, because I don't know, I don't really want to say like, oh, there's a place for queers in the Catholic Church, because I have not found that to be true. And I think that the most important thing is, like, there's a place for queers in the world and in the hearts of other people. And so we don't need a place in an institution. And in fact, most of them hate us. Or if we go back a couple years, or last week, but like, it's okay. And that's okay. Like, that's actually like the common denominator of most powerful people in most religions, is that institutions were made uncomfortable by them. So like, I think that's a paradox, that I'm kind of always walking the line of, is like, I still think in these stories that I heard, but I don't, I want to give hope for our survival. I don't necessarily know that, like, I don't know about the place for Christianity in my kind of, in anything I want to say to other people, like,
Yeah.
God bless, but I don't know.
I appreciate that tension and that honesty. I think that's really important, and that comes through in your book. Sonora, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know that I want people to come out of my book feeling any specific way about religion in general, other than the fact that, because in my book, Yami has her religious trauma, and she's not religious anymore. She doesn't identify as Catholic anymore. But you have other characters who do, and they kind of have, that's their power. Like her mom, well, I don't want to give too much away, but her mom does use the Bible to justify like her views on a lot of things, and including for her love for her kids. And even Bo, the love interest, she's using Bible verses to argue with a priest about homosexuality and why it's valid. And so like she's Catholic, even if a lot of people read that and they think maybe Bo's not super religious. She's not super devout, but she's Catholic, and she uses the Bible also to to justify who she is to herself. And so I think there are, however you can, like whatever ways you can find to validate like your identity and like yourself, and just to feel like you, I think is valid. Like you can, if religion makes you feel othered and not accepted, drop it. Like it's not it's not necessary, and you can still have your own spiritual practice without being religious. And I think that is, it can be just as freeing and just as important. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of nuance with like how, I don't want to like demonize all like religious people, but at the same time, like it is true that the institutions are not always, often not very welcoming towards us. And so it's totally valid for any, queer, marginalized in any way person to shy away from religion for that reason, at least as an institution. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of show the different forms that can take.
So we have a community question from Lex that's related. They ask, did writing this help you process your own relationship with spirituality?
Yep. A lot. Yeah. So I didn't realize how much trauma I had to process writing this book. I was just there was so much that, like, as I wrote the book through Yami, like Yami's not me, and I have like a different experience in a lot of ways than Yami had. But I got to take a lot of my own feelings about God and about the church and the way people treated me and all of that. And I got to put it in her head and let her process it and let her come out okay on the other side. And just giving her those same problems, but giving her that happy ending and a way out, basically. Like that helped me process so much. And I actually feel like before I started writing this book, I was very, and I still am, like, I have always been very critical of the Catholic faith, like as an institution. And most religions, I feel like I'm very critical of as institutions. But that doesn't mean that they can't hold, power in their own way. And I kind of found that through writing, in exploring some of the side characters of like, okay, well, why would this person think this way? Or like, why would this person, even believe in God after all of this? And so just kind of getting in their heads, I kind of processed some things and like kind of came to terms with how that works for a lot of people. And I'm a lot less, I don't want to say I was ever like judgy about it, but I definitely like I felt like if I found out someone was religious, I would be like, oh, they don't like me, and now I'm kind of like, I'm taking myself out of that equation, and I'm like, I don't know, what their relationship is with any of that. So I kind of feel a little more like wow, it's so complicated. It's still so complicated. So I haven't like fully, finished my process for anything, but I'm on the way to, I'm learning more every day. And I feel like while I'm still very critical of the Catholic faith, for my own reasons, and it's given me my own fun, stories and traumas and all of that, I can understand other people. I think that writing the book kind of helped me to get there. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
Oh, that makes total sense. Thank you. What about you, Mertz?
Yeah, I like about religion that you get to talk about like what's right and wrong, and you get to reflect on a set of stories. And I feel like those are really exciting things to do. So I think that maybe inclusion of more stories would be cool. Like there are like lots of trans and queer saints, but they've been erased on purpose. So it's also like a thing where I don't like every time I'm kind of like, I'm never going to think about that Catholic Church again. And then I'm like, oh yeah, this cool trans masculine saint that lived in the year 300, or Joan of Arc, you know, who I'm against war, but like Joan of Arc, I make an exception for a little bit, but like clearly a trans person or genderqueer person, you know, and they just don't talk about that part where they tell the story. But like if they told that story in a little bit of a different way, it could make a lot of queer kids feel better, you know. So like I'm not opposed to it. I have hope for it sometimes. I'm very reticent about expressing it, I guess, but like I'm like, this could be a thing that could actually do what it says it's supposed to do, like love and, you know, be nice to people and look at all these different cool people that lived, they died, and now they're, you know, we could talk about them. And like those are powerful things. But if you, the thing that freaks me out about it is the consistency, or the sort of like, you know, I guess in our time, like we live in this very conservative, like clamping down on everybody's genitals time. So I feel like it's not, yeah, there's a lot more there that could be amazing, but it's not being emphasized maybe right now in America.
Who is the saint that not Joan of Arc, but the other trans saint? Do you remember their name?
There's like 30 trans masculine early church monks, and they there's a couple of things, like there's stuff online about them. Their names are eluding me all right now. Like I think Theodore is one, but the response to them would be like they would die, or somehow if someone found out that they were born women, and someone else would be like, whoa, God's amazing. Like God made a man out of this woman. Wow. And like, that was it. That was like, it was like Brother Mike is still Brother Mike. They didn't like a couple of them, when they were found out, they went back to living as women, but most of them didn't. And like most of them, that's part of their spiritual story, is that then they became men. And one of them, Mary of Egypt is how we remember her, or him, which is stupid. But like, I think his name was Marinos. But he has like, there's top surgery scars maybe in the icon. Like, it's like, is that a top surgery scar? Do my eyes deceive me? Like, I think that's what that is.
Nice.
So yeah, like, wouldn't that have been great to know when we were growing up? Like, that would have been awesome to hear. But they were just like, we're going to not tell them that one. Like,
yeah, I felt very subversive for choosing Joan of Arc as my confirmation saint. Like that was my little like fuck you. But
yeah.
So we have one more question from the audience, which is about the writing process. So were there some parts during the drafting or in the final version that you had to cut but wish could have been there for a future uncut version? Or just, you know, more generally, were there things that you cut that you kind of mourned having to cut?
I'll go because I have mine popping into my head, which is the first time I smoked pot. I had in there, and I like argued with like 2 agents and several editors. Like I kept it in and kept it in and kept it in, and then finally the editor was like, you know, I don't know if you really need. But it was like important to me because it was like showing that like, oh, like I did it with these 2 guys, these 2 like big burly men who were free to disobey the rules of the Catholic Church in many ways that I was not. And one of them was like drinking and smoking weed, and like I was like, so like the good girls were not doing that. Like there was no weed. Every once in a while there was some wine, you know, like that was the big thing that the girls were up to in the door. But then I found out like, oh, these boys are out here like doing all this fun stuff. Like what the heck? And it was kind of therapeutic for me, but like yeah, I'm more into the loss of the pot scene. Yeah.
I didn't cut a lot of scenes that I truly miss. I tend to kind of forget about the things that I cut. But there is, I will say, something that I would like to do that we'll see if publishing ever lets me. But I think that there's another story that could be told in this universe from like maybe Seth's perspective. So maybe I could write about that. Maybe that's something that I wish I could do. We'll see. I don't know. Probably won't happen, but maybe.
You could write your own fan fiction.
I could write my own fan fiction. I could. So yeah, if it's never a book, it might be on AO3. So
I think that's a great idea. So since we're a bookstore, I always like to ask, you know, what books either do you want to just shout out that you think are maybe underread, things that were influences for you, or just like contemporary books that you're loving, just anything, any books you want to shout out that you want to make sure people know about?
I really like Café con Leche by Emery Lee. All Signs Point to Yes just came out a couple days ago. It's an anthology. There's a lot of queer stories in there. And it has to do with like astrological signs. 1500 Miles from the Sun by Johnny Garzavia. I feel like it might be out of print, but get the ebook if you can, or I mean, I guess it's a bookstore, so maybe if you can get it, but it's really good. I love it. Let's see. I'm trying to think of stuff that is not over like hyped. What's that book called? 808's Another Worlds by Sean Avery Medlin. It's like a local Arizona author. Yes. Yeah. I don't want to go on for too long. I could just name a ton of books.
Great.
On the topic of Catholicism, I am reading this book, Caliban and the Witch, and it's about Silvia Federici wrote it, and it's about like the origins of capitalism and how they're really connected to misogyny and burning witches and enslaving non-European people by European people. So it's really fascinating because it's full of history that I never knew. And the one that is like sticking in my craw lately is that these heretics like 1,000 years ago were organizing and being like, hey, we should be, a lot of women, we should be able to like use birth control and have abortions sometimes. And they were like, shut the fuck up. Like, don't even, oh, sorry. But don't, like, we'll burn you now, And I knew so many women who that was like the huge struggle of their life, was thinking like that they were the first woman to think, wow, maybe the Catholic Church is not right about birth control. Like, this is hard for my body and my mind and my soul and my other children. And like the fact that these heretics were like organizing and publishing and writing about this stuff and like 1,000 years ago was so infuriating to me, because that really was like all these women I knew thought that they were alone and that they were just like, the first person to kind of question this, and that other women's questioning had been like just not told to them. and they were only presented with like, oh yeah, no one's ever, only like assholes have questioned this, like only evil people, not good people. So yeah, like just learning history, I think, is so powerful for that, for that reason. Trans people too, like we've been here the whole time. They act like we just got here.
Yeah. Realize that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all both so much for this conversation, for your lovely books. I want to encourage folks to click this teal button at the bottom of the screen to buy the Lesbiana'S Guide to Catholic School and Burning Butch from Charis. It really does help us when you buy books from us. You also can support our programming. If you would like to make a donation to our nonprofit, that's how we pay for all of our events and programming. So that also super helps us. I know some folks made a donation on the way in, so thank you if you've already done that. We have a great Pride Month throughout the month of June. So we basically have an event almost every night. So if you're new to Charis, or if you just popped up here because you knew one of these folks, check us out at charisbooksandmore.com. We would love for you to see our whole slate of really exciting queer and trans books and authors. We also have, if you're a teen watching, we have a huge teen YA section in particular for LGBTQ books. And we would love for you to come find yourself on our shelves. So, or also, if you're an adult who missed getting to read books that actually reflected yourself as a teen, go read YA, because again, it's very healing to go back and read stories about high school that actually reflect your high school experience. So no shame in being a grown-up reading YA, especially queer YA. So thank you both so much. I hope you stay safe and well. And if you're ever in Atlanta, I'd love to host you in person.
Yeah, I'll be there. Awesome. Thank you, ER. Thank you, Sonora.
Thank you.